Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How are we all doing today? It is Sunday, the 27th of July, 2025. I can't believe we're nearly at the end of July. This year seems to be racing through in a blast. But hey, every year goes by quicker and quicker. Now, I believe we might be a little bit on the quiet side tonight because there's some football match going on. I profess I don't know much about it, but whoever's playing, I think it's going to be an interesting game, and good luck to those involved. What else did I want to say? So today we are going to be talking about hoarding. This is something we're going to, well, I think from the response I had last week, something we are all guilty of doing. So before we get into it, let's see who we've got in joining us. Adrian is there saying hello, Richard, and hello to you. We have got, what's happened there? Why has that moved? I can't do on that small screen anymore. Sorry, everybody. We have got Jenny saying hello, everyone. I hope you are well. Scott is there saying good evening, all. Good evening to you. Turbo Extreme saying good evening, Veg Podcasters. Good evening to you. Digwell is Kushilawa Balimi. Good evening, gardeners in Zulu. And Doodle Sparkle is also joining us saying hello. And just in at that, Nicola, evening, Richard and all. Nice bit of rain last night and this morning. We had no rain here. Just checking Instagram because I need to keep a close eye on that because I often do forget about it. So, hoarding. This is what we're going to be talking about today. Something that I get the impression we are all guilty of doing. So I thought what I would do is just open up quickly with a few notes that I have made, a bit of a monologue, if you like, to start the ball rolling. Now, I floated this topic on the end of last week's show, something that's been going on in my life. But one of the things that really shone through last week was how much you all really wanted to talk about it. So I guess this was something that you are all dealing with yourself. You all seem to be a bit of a hoarder. I think it's a gardener's thing. But I will talk about that as we go on through. I'll talk about my personal circumstance anyway. So I dismantled my old shed, and in its place I put up another shed. But in order to dismantle the shed, I had to empty it first. And this shed, it was just a store. It was just somewhere I placed some of my old tools, netting, pieces of junk that I didn't really use or that I haven't used in a long time. Stuff that needed storing. But it did, as I was going through it, it did make me wonder just why I'm keeping hold of this stuff. Do I really need a spare spade when I've only got one pair of hands? A spare fork, or do I need spare of all my other tools? I also went through a stage where I was collecting some really old gardening tools because I just thought they looked cool. These were things like turf irons that you don't really use these days. I just thought they would look cool. But the reality is they were all taking up that precious space. Now, as a content creator, like some of us are also, I'm often given items from brands in order to try and promote that brand. You only have to look behind me to see how much stuff this comes into. And some of these items can be good, some can be bad. Nothing you see behind me is bad, I'll say that. But the trouble is, I do end up with lots and lots of different items. I'm meant to make content out of them. Sometimes it's easier said than done. Time gets in the way. I've got to run experiments and try all these different things. Feeds and seeds, plant feeds and seeds are some of the worst offenders here. I get given lots of both of those, and there's only so many of these that you can use. There's only so much that you can use them for. And I don't like to waste things either at that same point. So throwing things in a bin is hard for me to do. I believe we live in a very, very wasteful world, and just throwing stuff away for the sake of throwing stuff away is adding to that problem. So rather than waste it, I've always tended to hoard these items with the view that I will eventually get round to using it. But added to that, one of my biggest reasons for hoarding is some of my planned projects, particularly upcycling. I think everyone is guilty of saying, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to save this for that, we're going to save it for that, this. And it never eventually happens. Wood piles are probably some of the biggest offenders of that. Piles of wood that you think you're going to make a shed out of, or you're going to do this or that with. Does it ever happen? Sometimes yes, quite often no. Now, one of the worst offenders for me is plant pots. For me, I seem to have hundreds and hundreds of plant pots, to the point I've said before, I swear that they breed. I've filled up several dustbins full of plant pots that I might use one day, but by the time I do eventually use them, they would have filled up my entire garden with potted plants. So there's a bit of a problem going on there. My question then, or two questions really. First of all, who can resonate with similar stories to my own circumstances? Who feels they're bad at hoarding and things like that? And the second question, how do we stop this hoarding? So let's go back to the comments. Nicholas saying hello to Jenny. Kate has joined saying good evening, Veg Army. Good evening to you. Digwell is saying England versus Spain, a World Cup final. What have we got? Oh, I've got to move this over again. I can't do it on that one. What have we got? What have we got? What have we got? Evening. Nicholas says 2 forks are good for splitting perennials. Is that a reason to keep 2 forks? That's a good question. Good question to throw out there. Is having 2 forks a good enough reason to hoard stuff? Turbo Extreme says, I was hoarding lengths of wood with no idea what to do with it. Some kind of beds. I now have a plan to use a said lengths of wood to make a bed to simplify my allotment, as it's now a chore. Yeah, wood is one of those I think we all tend to hold on to, especially if you've got an allotment, because it could come into use. Anna Jones says, evening gardeners, good evening to you. Nicholas says, use surplus seeds for microgreens if suitable. Yeah, that is one option. It just seems very wasteful at the same time. Jenny said, I made my old coal shed into a potting shed, 90 centimetres wide and 2.5 metres long. So not a lot of room. I made a shelf from an old apple tray. If pots, etc., don't fit on a shelf or on the table, it had to go. So far, still tidy. Oh, okay. So if you don't have room for something, you get rid of it. That might be one of the secrets to how we can deal with this hoarding problem. It's not a bad option, actually. If you don't have room for it, it goes. Turbo Stream says, some plan is to make beds up out of the wood and extend the grass paths to make the allotment enjoyable again. I moved 2 Dalek composters this weekend to start to tidy things up. There we go. Digwell says, my biggest hoard is and are pots and cell trays. I buy new but never throw the old ones out, except Hacknick's cheap root trainers because they get sharp when broken. I mean, exactly the same. I've got some of my cell trays that have holes in them, but you can still make use of some of them. But it just feels wrong to throw them out. Very wasteful. So I'm with you on that. Pots, cell trays, absolutely. Kate says, yeah, I hoard a bit, seeds and pots. Another one for seeds and pots. Nicholas says, often plant pots are the wrong size you want, or the wrong size to what you want. Absolutely. Jenny says, I had so many pots, understandable, but I had tools I can't use. It made no sense. The tight space made me very strict with myself. So this is actually a very interesting point, because I do think we are strict, and having a small space does mean you do have to be quite strict with yourself. It still feels wrong. The trouble I have is that I've got a fair bit of room, so everything tends to block up. If I didn't have the room, I couldn't keep it all, but I would find some way of keeping it. But yeah, I'm with you. Doodle says, I'm the opposite of hoarding. I'm a neat and minimal addict, but our plot is only 6 by 6 meters, so we have to be. So I like neat. I like being neat and tidy. I really do like, you wouldn't believe it if you knew me, but I actually do like being neat and tidy. I'm constantly trying to keep my shed tidy, constantly trying to reduce stuff and keep it organized. I think organized is more the word that sums up what I am. May not be neat, may not be minimal, but it is organized in a roundabout way. But yeah, I think being more stricter with ourselves and saying, do we really need it? Can we warrant the space for it all? Is something we all need to think about. Anna Jones said, we used every plant pot in our shed last summer when we had to regrow so many garden plants after the floods. Never thought we would need them, but along came a disaster and we used every single one. That's an interesting point. How often does a disaster like that come along? And not trying to dismiss anything, like would hoarding just in case something happens, a bit like a prepper, I guess you could say. For those who don't know what I mean by a prepper are a group of people who are preparing for an end of the world disaster type scenario. So they keep hold of 30 years worth of food, etc., etc. Is that the right way to go about things? I don't know. Turbo Extreme says, I do have a load of sail trays, but they were bought and they didn't work well. At least they stack. Nicholas says, since I moved to Cornwall, I have loads of brick storage, old milking parlour and associated buildings for processing milk and a cow shed, plus half an outside laundry shed, plus open ground. So Nicholas obviously got a lot of space, including buildings, but this is always something that's worried me. And if I had more space, would I just fill it with more junk? Who would find themselves if they had more space, they would fill it with more junk? Question I'm going to throw out there. Jenny says, I had a huge seed sort out the other day. I've kept some old seeds for microgreens and green manure, but a lot has gone. Felt wrong, but I'll never eat 8 packets of cabbage seeds, etc. Interesting. So just getting rid of it sometimes, just to get it gone, makes all the difference. Scott says, I try not to hoard, but still seem to fill an empty space. Yeah, absolutely. Plus now I can justify a seed order session. Don't forget to use my affiliate code with Premier Seeds. Turbo Stream says, I have so many seeds. One reason I paused the supporters club for the time being, I was overwhelmed by them and so much pressure to be in sowing them, even though I didn't need to sow them. Yeah, again, this is one of the downsides. When it comes to seeds, I have got boxes and boxes full of seeds. I'm going through them. I'm trying to use them all up. I want them to go into use. I don't want them not being used. I want them used up. But they do seem to grow and grow and grow. And then I end up with more and more and more and more seeds. Obviously, I do buy a lot of seeds. And obviously, I have the supporters club. But one of the reasons that I built the supporters club is to give seeds that can only be or are designed to be sown in that very month, so that they are not hanging around. Now, of course, not everybody has to sow them. It's just the way I've set it up. But seeds do have an expiry date. Sometimes they can be more or less depending on a variety of conditions and what they say. But they do have an expiry date that can sometimes add pressure to get them sown. Let's have a quick check on Instagram. Over on Instagram, Nancy Bowden and Sean Kinkley has joined. Welcome along. Lovely to see you. Nicholas says, Jenny, I grow the surplus cabbage seeds for my chooks. Yep, that's one way of using it up, isn't it? Digwell says, my hoarding of tools, etc., has seen me good now that I have 2 plots and a home, one set of everything in each place. So I'm with Digwell on this, actually. I do not like having to carry tools to and from my allotment. That's why I have sheds on the allotment. I have a lawnmower, I have a strimmer, I have all my tools down there, so I can just rock up and do what needs doing. So sometimes hoarding tools can be a good thing, but is it better to buy the tools when you need them or just buy them when they are available? What do you think? What do you think on that? Jenny says, good idea, Nicola. Let me know if you want more. Nicholas says it's all useful. Some projects need finishing and things moving around. It's amazing how often things come in handy here. I don't doubt it. I don't doubt it. And I'm going from my personal experience here is that yes, or I'll use the example of the wood pile because everybody probably has a wood pile. And it's normally these bits of wood that you offcuts of bits of wood usually that you think you're not going to throw away because they might come in useful one day. When does there come a point that it's just sitting there taking up space and not actually come in use? Or the second you throw away is probably the time you need it as well. I say that because it's a dilemma I'm having. And I am starting to find myself moved to the point that if I have anything for more than a year or something that doesn't get used in a year, then I think it needs to go. That's kind of my cutoff point because it takes up space. Now, when it comes to projects, especially upcycling projects or things like that, I am now of the view that I'm gonna get the wood when I'm doing the projects, rather than trying to get it in advance and plan the project when I get round to it. I'm going to get everything I need when I do that project. Trying to beat that hoarding problem. Nicholas says to Digra, 2 ride-on mowers classed as hoarding? Don't know. Good question. Turbo Stream says, I'm considering a new shed, but like you say, would I just move the junk from my old shed and continue to collect? I think what Doodle said earlier about being, and Jenny as well, being strict with ourselves. If we haven't got space, it has to go. It's something that I'm really liking. Kate says, I do go to Seed Swap for things I don't use and get ones. I will. I missed them this year, so I've got a lot to swap. Actually, no, that does come up with a good option, Kate. As a seed swap, can we, if we have too many seeds, can we swap them with others? Do we need to organise more seed swaps to sort this out? That might be something we could do. I'm thinking about putting one in my front garden. Perhaps that is something we can look at. Rob has joined. Good evening all. Hope you've had a great week. Same to you, Rob. Lovely to see you. And Digger seeds. Seeds are meant to grow and grow. They are, but the collection isn't meant to, is it? Or is it? Or is it? Question there. Tell me, I did clear out my allotment shed this year and got donated a few tools that I didn't use. So this is actually, this reminds or brings to my mind something that I don't like throwing things away for the sake of throwing things away. I feel it's a bit wasteful. But perhaps we could donate some of the stuff we're not using somewhere that they could be used. That's a thought, isn't it? That is a thought. Nicholas says, I like to get stuff off Facebook free or cheap, and in my head they are lined up for a project. Yeah, again, I'm not against the idea of that, but then if you haven't got much room, does that just take up space and make things look messy? That's where I'm going with. And I say that because I've done that for years. I've collected things that I'm going to do turn into a project. I've got a beer keg that I was going to turn into a barbecue or a planter. It's just been sat there in the garden, not being used. Things like that do tend to happen. So just because it's free or cheap, do I really need it? Do I really need it? And Nicholas says, like my 78 pavers that you've seen going down in my small veg garden rebuild. Again, let's put them into use. That's putting them into use. Turbo Stream, I looked in an old composter on my plot only to find 3 watering cans. So that's 5 watering cans I have down there now. I have 3 cans at home too. See, again, watering cans are another thing. I do have quite a few watering cans, thinking that it would make sense. But I only have 2 pairs of hands. I can only carry 2 watering cans at once. So why would I need 5? This is where it gets complicated. Nicholas says, I brought a new potting shed like yours, Richard, £150. Knew it was 1,000. I'd not paid for that. I'd not have paid that for quality, but still good investment. Yeah, Yeah, we go. Sometimes you can get bargains. Sometimes you do get bargains. Rob hoards seeds, and Scott says lots of plots that became empty are full of useful items that never seem to have been used. I think if you haven't used an item in a year or two, get rid of, pass on. So this is it. This is where my thinking is at the moment. If I haven't used an item in a year or two, I think I need to get rid of it and pass it on. Does that apply to seeds? Does that apply to everything else? I don't know, but it certainly opens up lots of questions on how we deal with it. Swig of coffee coming right up. Digwell says the 5S red tag methodology. Put red tag on everything over a 4-week period, maybe 3 months for us. Remove the red tag if you use it. Anything with a tag still on gets binned after the allotted time. I like this idea. This is a very good idea. So you go around and put a tag on absolutely everything. Maybe tie a bit of coloured string or something. I don't know. So that, and you do that. Let's say you do that at the beginning of a year, December, January. And then as you go throughout that year, if you use an item, you remove that tag. If it's still there at the end of the year, get rid of it. That I like. If I did that, I like that a lot. Jenny says, but if you have a watering can under each water bite, you can easily grab one when need, and you can fill the can before rain it due to make room in the water bite. Yeah, again, this is a justification for having more than one watering can. Fill it up, more space in the water butt. Agreed. But it does cause some issues when it comes to space and things like that. And I'm saying that because hoarding can be a problem for a lot of people. And I think as gardeners, I tell you what, who feels they're a hoarder? Who feels they have more stuff than they could ever use? That might be a question to throw out there. Let's see a raise of hands. Rob says, if I did that, my shed would be empty. So you have more space for growing more plants. Toby, actually a serious point that hardening can get out of control. Thank you. Yeah. We had a plot holder give up this year, and it's taken the committee 3 months to clear it at a cost of nearly £1,000. Yeah. This is it. Hoarding can be a problem. Jenny says, can I tag a person? You certainly can. Anna Jones says, I have several blunt shears, a pair of jam secateurs, and an extendable lopper with a bit missing. I'll mend them one day. Until then, I will hoard them. This is actually another thing that I think we're guilty of. I'm certainly guilty of things that are broken that I know I can fix, or I believe I can fix, that end up just taking up space. Never get around to fixing them. We've got this, it's like an upside down umbrella that goes in our fireplaces when not in use. They're meant to basically keep the warmth in. Good piece of kit. One of them has broken. And I said, I'll fix it one day. It's been way too long. So we're just going to throw it away and get a new one. I'm never going to fix it. Same with tools. I've got a few broken spade handles and things like that. Easy to fix. Am I ever going to get around to fixing it when I don't need to? Don't know. Nicholas says, love lots of watering cans in different parts of the garden. Hate it when you get somewhere and watering cans in the wrong place. Have one by the ducks, a couple by the chickens, then near the house and in the veg garden. That's only effective if you remember to fill them up, though, isn't it? Excuse me. You've got to remember to fill them up at the same time. 100% Richard, garden and in-house. Yeah, well, I don't know what I said. Turbo Stream, the plot looked like a refugee encampment. Unbelievable the amount of stuff he had. They found a shed buried in the soil. Yeah, I mean, if you look at my garden at the moment, by the way, I should tell you all this little bit of a story. As you know, driveway has been a project going on, and then it went to having my paths done because my drains were on the way out. Well, my drains got dug up this weekend, and we had a couple of collapsed drains, believe it or not, around our house. So we've spent this weekend having no drains. So we can't use a toilet, we can't have a bath or shower, can't do the washing up, etc., etc. Or rather, we have no drains for all that waste to go down. It's been a bit of an eye-opener, to say the least. But the reason I was going through that is one of the things I had to do in order to get this project underway is out in our back, we had pots of herb planters, Belfast sink planters with herbs in, wood store, etc., etc. And I've had to clear and move all that onto our lawn area, and our lawn area now looks like Steptoe's yard because it's just so full of what might be to many people junk, but I see it more as items waiting to be used. But to me, it's looking like junk at the moment, and I've got to think about how to get rid of some of the stuff that I don't need. Hoarding, says Nicola. Yeah. Thumbs up, all. Yeah, please do give us a thumbs up, a like, a subscribe, and click the notifications so you know when we go live. Turbo Stream says, we had a scrappy collect from the allotment. The pile was huge. Committee said it was a good chance to clear all the metal off the site. Yeah. I've got metal coming out my ears that I need to scrap as well. So it's what we've got to do. Nicholas says, I've got a camping loo you can borrow, Richard. Our drains will be sorted by Tuesday, hopefully, but we've got a camping toilet that we've been using. Trouble is, we've got nowhere we can empty it into at the same time. So it's not easy. It's not a particularly nice subject to talk about either. Gary has joined. Hello all. Sorry I'm late. Not sure how long I'm staying either, but nice to see you all and think about allotments for a while. We're talking about hoarding. Are you guilty of hoarding items in your allotment, your vegetable garden, that you're happy to share with us? Over on Instagram, Elaine Vincent, Bearded Growers, and Team Clean has joined us over there. Lovely to see you. Hope you are well. So I want to hear hoarding stories. I want to hear some stories of some of the stuff that you have hoarded that you thought might come in use. One of the things that I've hoarded at the moment, but I'm realizing that I really should get rid of, my old shed, the shed that I took down that I spoke about earlier. I had planned to, when I took down that shed, to take it down the allotment and put it up down on the allotment so that it didn't go to waste. But when I was taking it down, it was going to be almost impossible to make it last any longer. It fell apart. It was rubbish. So that is now strewn across my garden. When we get a bit more space, I'm going to cut it down, and that'll be our winter fuel. Where was I going with this? And that was one of the stories. That's one of the stories about something I'd aimed to hoard, but now I'm realizing it's just junk. Turbo Stream says, if you're embarrassed about the stuff in your garden, Richard, then that's a clue to get rid of it all. So yeah, so the stuff that I'm talking about. So yes, there's the old shed that I was just talking about. That is across the garden. That's going to be cut down, and that's going to be our winter fuel, for one thing. My wood store, again, our winter fuel. We have a wood store because we burn wood on our fireplaces over winter, so we need somewhere to store it to keep it dry. That's strewn across the garden. I had 4 Belfast sinks. I still got 4 Belfast sinks that we would grow mint and sage and things like that in. They're across the lawn as well at the moment because they did sit on the path underneath the kitchen window. Also, things like our water butts, all the things that are going to be used and have places. At the moment, they just look like they're strewn across the garden. It's rather embarrassing. Gary says, yes, guilty as charged. I am actually shutting down my old allotment this week off work and wish I didn't have so much junk wood. Shutting down my old allotment and didn't have so much junk wood, rubble, polytunnel frames, etc. Yeah. I'm with you on that. Broken glass and things like that we think might come in useful. Why you shut down your old allotment? Have you got a new one or something, Gary? Let us know. So yeah, I want to hear more stories of the stuff that you seem to hoard. Now, one of the things that I noticed when I was going through my old shed was my nets. Now, how many of us have nets that we protect our brassicas with? I bet most of us do. The trouble with things like nets and cloches is that they take up space, and trying to store them can be very, very tricky. And I think that is where hoarding can become a different side of things, because we may hoard on to stuff that we're going to use. It may be stuff that we use regularly, such as our nets, but when you store them in the shed and they look messy and they're piled up in a shed, it don't look good. As I've said before, I love shed porn. Tidy, organized sheds is what I go for. Having stuff that you don't have room for but you use does not go into that. Jenny says, one hoard I'm very grateful of. My grandparents and uncle kept everything. I now grow in the clay pots my grandparents used and their hand tools, growing food for at least 4 generations in our family with them. There we go. So hoarding does have some benefits. It do have benefits. Gary says, I've been looking after my plots since my friend's plot since he died, but I've struggled with both. I will take his on as my own from now on. I'm very sorry to hear about your loss, Gary, but well done at the same time. Digwell says, if you have metal coming out your ears, I suggest going to a doctor. Yeah, it might work, but it means I've got good iron in my blood, doesn't it? So certain advantages. Turbo Stream says, after my friend died, I cleared the stuff he had collected, filled my garage, all of the old meat crates, plastic, etc., etc. So here we go. This is something that I think is worthy of mentioning. We're talking about hoarding. When we have tools, equipment, materials from people that have been very close to us and have passed away, it also becomes very difficult to get rid of them at the same time. I know when I cleared out my step granddad's garden, I came away with some concrete, the irony here, concrete drainage things. They slot together to make drainage pipes, which I now use as pots down on the allotment. They're very, very good. I've got to say, they're very useful and they look absolutely great when they're full of compost. But they're the type of thing my step granddad would hoard onto. And it would just take up space. Now, my step granddad was a bit of a hoarder, and that's being quite mild about him. He was a really lovely bloke, police sergeant, so very, very clued up. But he did tend to hoard a lot of items. And when he passed away, it was passed on to my stepdad to clear it. And it was the house he lived in, the house they rented out, and a place they had in France, a cottage in France that was full up of old lawnmowers and things like that had broken, etc., etc. So there's an element that when you pass it on, or when we pass it on to our loved ones, or when we get it from our loved ones, there's sentimental value. But at the same time, does it make it difficult for those left behind on how to get rid of it as well? That's a bit of a morbid story, actually. I probably shouldn't go down that. Nicholas says, I bought in Brighton back before 2005 a large box of heavy-duty eyelet screws. They moved in Brighton and now down to Cornwall. They come in handy, used maybe 20 out of hundreds. There we go. There we go. Scott says, I've hoarded suits that I had in my 20s and hope that they will fit in them again one day. Fools around. Yeah. You could dress up your scarecrow in your suits as an option. Gary says, have you talked about plant pots yet? So many plant pots. There's something we have touched upon, but I think there's more we could say about plant pots, isn't there? I think we could talk more about plant pots. Jenny says, get them on Vinted, Scott. Make money to buy seeds and pots. That's an idea. That's an idea. And Turbo Stream says, my loft is full of stuff my mum had saved from her parents and grandparents. One of my winter jobs is to sort through it and hopefully decide on what to do with it. He goes on to say it's a burden that's fallen on his shoulders now. It's a point. It's a good point. Nicholas says, yes, Gary, I never seem to have the right size when I come to use them. So I think the thing we touched upon when it came to pots is that it's not so much, well, it is a case that we have too many pots, but I think the way we store them is something that we need to look at more, because I tend to store mine in dustbins outside, just because that was convenient at the time. But I want to keep mine in the shed when I'm going to use them in my potting shed, my new potting shed. But I'm going to have them all organised in the right pots for the right sizes, all together, rather than a mash of mixed pots, mixed everything in the wrong containers, etc., etc. That's the way I look at it at the moment. We want to try and not just use these items, we want to store them properly to make them a bit more efficient. Nicholas says, I like tights stacked pots and sizes. So what Nicholas talked about, one of the things that some people will do is they take pots, pot them all together and then stack them in tights to hang up inside the shed. It's definitely an option of being a bit more tidy, a bit more organized. For me, I'm going more for some sort of racking system that I just slide underneath my shelves and then can use that for a storage of pots in all the same size. I should say, I've just seen Jenny has came up with it. Hashtag mission, make an inventory of pots and trays. Helps you see what you've got and what you will and won't need. Yeah, don't forget, if you want a challenge or mission for next week, hit in the comments with hashtag mission. Remember your mission for later though, because I certainly won't remember. Nicholas says, I hoard wheelie bins used for all sorts of storage. Yeah, wheelie bins. I mean, there's a lot to be said of making use of stuff that would otherwise be wasteful materials. But I come back to, are we hoarding more than we need? Or are we hoarding more than what we actually use? So I want to hear more of your hoarding stories. Anybody got anything else, any more stories they would like to throw in? And in the meantime, let's go to this week's cook along video, because it seems like a good chance to have a 5-minute break. Okay, so today we're making a courgette brownie. We've got milk chocolate here, we've got butter, we've got dark chocolate, we've got a courgette, which I've grown myself, 4 eggs, caster sugar, plain flour, and a mix of cocoa powder and chocolate. First of all, we need to melt this dark chocolate. Okay, so we got the dark chocolate and the butter melting in the on a hob. Egg and sugar. We're going to whisk this till it becomes a thick stuff. It does go for an electric whisk, but we're doing this by hand. Okay, this egg and sugar mixture is all nice and mixed up, nice and thick, doubled in size. So in goes the flour. In goes the cocoa and chocolate mix. In goes the milk chocolate. In goes grated courgette, and a lot of it at that. And also what goes in is the melted chocolate and butter. We're just going to pour that all in. We don't want to waste any of it. And we'll give it a good mix once again. Gotta say, this has made a really thick mix of stuff, really thick batter. But we want to make sure it's all fully mixed. There we go. So that looks about right. So now what we want to do, I've already got a pan here that I've greased with butter. We're just going to pour that in there, put it in the oven and let it cook. Well, here we go. It is cooked. It looks and smells absolutely amazing. Just needs to spend about an hour cooling. Then we'll turn it out, cut it into pieces, and then we'll have a piece in the dive show and see how it tastes. And this is what we've ended up with, the chocolate brownie. As you can see, it's cooked up beautifully. It's got a nice crispy top. It looks absolutely amazing. But what does it taste like? Mm. That's absolutely lovely. Absolutely lovely. Melts in your mouth. Literally melts in your mouth. So, nice and chocolatey. Got courgette in it, so that makes it healthy. Is that one of your 5 a day? I don't know. Absolutely lovely. Really enjoyed that. I'm going to give that 10 out of 10. I think that's the first time I've ever awarded a 10 out of 10, but that is lovely. I've got a whole tray of it to eat throughout the week as well. I'm trying to be good, but don't forget, if you want me to, I've got a cook-along idea, hit up with hashtag cook-along for next week. Where are we? So, Turbo Stream says there is a sign on our allotment gate asking for people not to donate old pots, as some people were chucking pots over the gate. Yeah, it's common on allotments to see old pots just laid next to them, thinking people are going to use them. But I think there's something, there's often too many pots going. I know in quite a few garden centres, they actually have places that you can take old pots and put them in like a large bin where they can be used by other members of the public or recycled. So have a look at your garden centre. If you have lots of pots, have a look in your garden centre and see if they could put them to use. Digger says, I sort my pots and trays out over winter when there is nothing else to do and wash them in the spring when I use them. Yeah, I do similar. I do wash mine before I put them away, more to get rid of all the old compost and things like that out of it. But I do try and I wash them before I put them away, basically. Not so much before I use them. That's the way I do it. That's the only difference. But over winter is the most important time. Scott says, is there a charity that you can donate seeds to? If not, I think there should be. There is a charity, I believe, that you can do that sort of thing with. But my advice is save them for a seed swap. Take them to your local seed swap. If you haven't got a seed swap, then look at starting one. What I'm going to be doing in the future is, once my driveway's done, I'm going to put a box out the front of my house on the wall with seed swap on it, and basically get people just to take any seeds and share them and what have you. That's my plan. Make it look like a bird box type thing. I think some people convert post boxes or phone boxes into them as well. That's my plan. It's got to look good, of course, but that's my plan. Start up a seed swap in my front garden. Can convert bins to wormeries. Talking about the wheelie bins. Good use, good use. You know, we do like to try and experiment with different things. Jenny says, I tried Scott, I couldn't find one. I also tried the food bank and local groups, etc., etc. Start your own. Just start your own out the front of your house with a seed swap. Can I pick the spoon? I think that's meant to be lick the spoon. If you want. There's not much of it left though, because I had to lick the spoon. Anna says, maybe some people recycle plant pots now that new colours are being sold. I believe black ones can't be put into recycling bins, but the newer ones can. There was something, so like the green ones were made out of old drinking bottles that were melted down and turned into plant pots, I believe. They're almost translucent green. So I also think there was something when black or brown plant pots went through a recycling machine, the recycling machine couldn't detect them. So we went to this grey coloured pots so that the recycling machine could detect them and pick them out. So there is some truth in it, but it's very complicated to work out what's the best to do there. You need a silicone spatula, Richard. Don't like silicone. or lick it. That should say, I thought it meant lick. Wooden Nicola. Yeah, I'm more of a wooden spatula person. I'm more wood. I've heard beetroot super in a brownie, says Nicola. Not tried beetroot, but have I? Have I tried beetroot? I might have done. I think anything works in a brownie, doesn't it? There's so many different things that we could do. Jenny says, Richard, are we getting a slice in our seed packs? It looks delicious. It might be a very, very small slice to go around to everybody. Looks good, says Digra. Thank you. Thank you. Tabby Stream, the hoarding is worse at the moment as the bin men are still out on strike with no end in sight. Are the bin men still in strike in Birmingham? Bloody hell. That's going on months, isn't it? Scott says, fantastic looking brownie right there. Thank you very much. And Digwa says, we have an old pot donation table, but most end up in the bin as they sit there for weeks. Yeah, I'm just going to do it outside my house. Digwa says, washing for pots before using them makes more sense as there are many pathogens, etc., that we cannot see. Yeah, I mean, that's how I do it. I just wash them before, more so because I just want to reduce them down so they store better. But yeah, Rob says, we used to have a medium-sized Kita storage box on an allotment for spare seeds that we could swap. Someone took the box and everything in it. Yeah, I mean, when I build mine, it's got to be secure. And Scott's actually said, set up the seed swap box. It's an idea. It's not going to be an easy one because I really need my front drive finished before I can complete that. They've been on strike since March the 11th. That's awful. That's awful. But I'm only learning more about this since I've not had any drains, really. Some councils took black ones now as they use more modern lasers to examine the waste. There we go. So recycling centres have got a bit more advanced in that time as well to find these black things as well, these black pots. So we all knew improvements were going to happen. So moving on, let's think about what other things that us gardeners tend to hoard that may not be so obvious. Compost, for example. I don't know about you, but I've got several different types of compost. We've got our seed sowing compost, which I use a lot of, so I don't mind having that. We've got multi-purpose compost, which again is one I use a lot of, so I don't mind having that. Ericaceous compost I've used very, very rarely, normally for my blueberries, etc., etc. Used rarely, but occasionally. I've got carnivorous plant compost. We've got citrus compost, orchid compost, all different mixes that are meant to be better for the plants that they are designed for. And is this another element of hoarding because we have so many different types that we might use, or you buy a bag and you buy a bag of, say, citrus compost and you only need a small amount. So what do you do with the rest? Turbo Strip says they've suspended the recycling, so not even my tins and jars are getting collected. No, never mind the black pots. Yeah, I wouldn't like to be there. And then Digra says, geez, your pots must be dirty. Talking about mine. Well, because I cleaned them before. It's more, when you the compost just gets stuck in the corners. I don't tend to use, or just around the edge. They just look dirty. I mean, yeah, it's dirty. It's gone to pot. This is Turbo Street. No one has noticed a Birmingham strike. The place looks. I'm not going to say anything against Birmingham. I'm not going to say anything against Birmingham at all. Let's have a check on Instagram again. Anything going on over there? Not that I can see. Yeah, I'm not going to say anything against Birmingham. Nicholas says, I bought 130 bags of compost 4 years ago using the last of this year. It was £1 instead of 8. Naughty peat based. So this is one of those times that hoarding can sometimes come into use, isn't it? When you can buy a large amount of bulk of stuff cheap. If you have the space, so 130 bags of compost, I'm guessing they're probably 50-litre bags in £1 instead of 8. So you've made a huge saving. So in some ways that makes sense if you have the space to hold 130 bags of compost. That is, not everybody is that lucky. Not everybody. Oh, they were 80 litres, even bigger. But not everybody is that lucky to have that much space. 130. I mean, that's almost all the compost in a B&Q or garden centre, isn't it? That's a lot of compost taking up a lot of space. But you have got yourself a bargain there at the same time. I was born in Bolton, so no offence taken. 80 litres. Indeed. Ugh. Yeah, so anybody has got anything that is a bit unusual that we tend to hoard. I mean, that the story about all that compost. Now, I don't know if I would necessarily call this hoarding. Actually, something I do tend to do is when I buy perlite or vermiculite, I tend to buy it in 100-litre bag from Amazon. The reason I buy it in 100-litre bags, if you went to a garden centre, a 10-litre bag is usually £10. But if you buy the 100-litre bag on Amazon, it's normally under £40. So you make a huge saving buying it on Amazon in bulk. And trust me, I do use 100 litres quite easily in a few years' time. But it takes space up. It does take space up. Digrat says, gardening witch say not to store bagged green waste compost for more than 3 months. Many fall foul of this by buying old compost in spring. I did think there is something about compost that has a tendency, compost can go off if it's kept in a bag. That's why they're pushing, as Digrat says, a use-by date on the backs. It was always the case, even with peat-based, all the nutrients that can be in the compost can get lost when it's in the bag. That's why they do tend to say they go off after a while. But it also opens up more areas of what you do with the old compost. How do you get rid of the old compost? Or what could you use it for? There you go. Rob says, I've got about 150 bags of compost, farmyard manure and wood chips at my warehouse. So again, you're lucky enough to have space. If you've got a warehouse, you've got somewhere you can store it. Now, I've got a bin, and I need another bin, really. A bin full of the compost that I take out. You know, when you, let's say you're pricking out your seedlings or you're planting up into bigger pots and you get some compost left in a pot, or a plant dies, for example, you get that compost left in a pot. I have been putting that into a separate bin, and I'm going to be using that as a mulch in my garden when the time becomes available. So I've been storing that compost. In fact, I probably should start spreading it around now. I've been storing that compost to use as a mulch, but again, it's taking up space that we don't have. So that's probably another form of hoarding in some ways, because I'm holding on to it until I really need it. I could probably put it into use in some places now. Old compost, something I'm hoarding onto. Digrat says, not so for peat-based as it stores for years. The peat compost does. It's the nutrients inside it that can be, I can't remember what I used to say now because it's contradicting something else. I don't know. They used to say that you'd need to use your compost quite quick, even years ago before peat-free was a thing. They used to say you needed that to use your compost because the nutrients in it could get washed out. After all, the compost bags themselves are not sealed. They still allow moisture and air through. So, yeah. Nicholas says, Richard, all you could use for potatoes, buckets, and feed. I don't really grow potatoes in buckets, but it's certainly an option. I want to use it more as a mulch for my beds because I don't want to hold it around till next year anyway. And my beds need topping up, so I'm going to save it. I'm going to save it for that. Turbo Stream says the spare compost after pricking out gets maxed back into the bucket and gets reused. Seems a waste to not reuse it. The reason I don't reuse it in that same way is because there could still be some seeds in that compost that hasn't germinated. For whatever reason, they could germinate in something else. So, for example, you might have a tomato germinate in your lettuce seedling, and you may not realize it, but you suddenly eating a tomato instead of lettuce, a tomato foliage, for example. That's the reason I don't. That's the reason I don't, because there's a risk in my eyes that a seed could be in that compost that could germinate. Lettuce and tomatoes is probably a bad example, but yeah, Digwell does the same as TurboStream, which and so does Rob for that matter. So I'm obviously the odd one out, but that's my personal feeling on it, is that there could be seeds left in it, particularly if I'm doing something like cress in the microgreens, and it's really, really thick sowing of seeds. It could still be in that compost. It could germinate in my other pots and effectively become a weed. Now, it could still, of course, happen when I use it as a mulch as well. I'm hoping that by the time it's been in there, it's going to have killed itself off because it's been in that pot, in that bin for so long. So that's the only reason I don't save it. Turbo Stream says if a stray seeds germinate, it's easy to pull it out, though, if you can recognize it as being different from what it originally was. So if we take beetroot and chard, for example, the seeds look very same, and when they germinate, they look very similar. So you may have what you think is chard, but it turns out to be beetroot. For example, Rob says I've had rogue petunias germinate with my chilies and tomatoes. There we go. That kind of proves my point. It may not be a problem for most people, to be honest, if that's something you're happy with, you can deal with. But for me, it's just an extra headache that I don't want. Again, I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It's we all do things differently. That's my stance on it. That is my stance on it. Let's have a quick check on Instagram. Nothing going on over there. There we go. There we go. Rob says just pull them out. Yeah, that is one way around it. Just pull them out. But again, I come back to, if you're doing like I do a lot of my seedlings in trays, etc., and something like beetroot and chard, very similar, and you won't know until it's fully grown. Digwell says green waste compost is organic in that it is still rotten. Peat-based tends to be inorganic chemicals, and the peat does not rot. It has already rotted down. Non-aerobionic decomposition, etc. I know they always used to, even with peat-based compost, they used to say don't keep it for more than, I think it was like a year before, because it did go off or something would go wrong with it. Maybe it got too dry. Maybe that was the problem. It got too dry in the bag. And when compost gets dry, it's very difficult to get rehydrated again. So perhaps that was the problem. I don't know. Yeah. Toby Stream says, whatever works for you, I guess, proves we are all different. Exactly right. We are all different. We all do different things. And that's something I'm keen to explore. This is a prime example of why what this show is all about, finding all the different ways that we all garden, what we all different do. So, sheds. Who here has a really tidy, organised shed that they can go straight in and get to exactly what they want? Whose shed is what I would call shed porn? Everything's set out. You've got drawers. Everything has a place, which is exactly what I like. Who has a shed like that? Digwell says, due to the World Cup final, pubs are open until 1 a.m. If it goes to penalties, they are open until 6 a.m. Go, ladies. Go, ladies. How are they doing? What's the score so far? What's going on at the moment? Nicholas says, I used potato compost for the peonies I bought. Thought I'd got all the tiniest of potatoes out. Now got potatoes growing in with them. We'll repot the peonies later in the autumn in fresh compost. See, that's one of the reasons as well that I don't like doing it. I guess you could sieve through the compost to remove all the tiny little potatoes. That might be one way of mitigating this. if you sieve through that compost, get every tiny little potato. Again, volunteer potatoes are well known for popping up in the soil, so they can pop up in compost as well. Digwell says a year maybe if stored outside. Is that talking about compost? Talking about compost? I guess it is. A lot of things that could be, isn't there? Over on Instagram, Mark J8108 has joined. Welcome along. We're talking about hoarding and how our sheds, or particularly how our sheds, could be much more of a tidy, organised oasis if we didn't hoard so much. Feeds and fertilizers was something that I touched upon because there are so many feeds and fertilizers. I'm just going to look behind me and see some examples. So I've got this, actually an empty bottle because I've used it. Autopot feed and fertilizer for autopots. As an example, we've got Westland's houseplant feed. We have got orchid feed for the orchids. What else have we got? Orchid water for the orchids. I probably could use that actually. We've also got on that note, Boost all-purpose granular 6-month feed. Again, probably could use that. Over the back now, I can't get them. We've got Envy liquid feeds, plant tomato, and etc. etc. What else? What else have we got? Not quite a plant feed, but worm castings. These are all pretty much ending up to do a similar sort of thing. All the sort of thing for hoarding onto because we think it might come in use. I mean, I tend to use a lot of the stuff here as setting, as decoration, to sort of, well, make it aware that we got some good. We're in a shed, basically. So Nicholas says, my shed is a job in progress since we moved. Will it be well organised when finished? Got filling drawers, shelves and a trolley ready for it, plus a tool hanging rack. Love it. Love an organised shed. Absolutely love an organised shed. Turbo Stream says, I did tidy my allotment shed this year. Now it's organised so I can find most things. Not the same story at home, though. Yeah, with you. Digwell says, I hope we are all different, mate. If we were all perfect like me, then the world would be a pretty boring place. England 1, Spain 1. What are they? Must be coming near the end now. You are unique, Digwell, that's for sure. Boost for hanging baskets. Is that for hanging basket? I can't remember. It's just a slow release fertilizer. I mean, that's not even touching what I've got in my main shed because I've got bloodfish and bone. I've got garden lime. I've got bone meal. I've got chicken manure pellets. The list goes on of all these different type of feeds and fertilizers that seems to be building up. Gary says, how is your vanilla orchid doing? I bought my mum one and it's doing amazing. Mine's doing really well, actually. I'm going to try and take a cutting from it because it seems at one point we've got two divergents. So I'm going to try and take a cutting of one and see if I can share it with Lucy. I'm sure she would love that, actually. So, yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. Digwell says, my biggest problem with volunteer spuds is that they could carry blight if the parent plant had an unknown touch on it the year before. Exactly right. Yeah, that is one of the fears as well. When we reuse compost, there could be plant material, particularly potatoes, tomatoes, etc., could carry on. Well, it could be clubroot as well and other things. It could also pass it on to the next plants as well. Jenny says, my shed is all tidy, everything within arm's reach, so small. If I don't tidy after each pot on session, it would be a nightmare. Yeah. Kate says it's in extra time. Fantastic. Does hoarding weeds count? It does count. Because that's something we can actually talk about and do something about. Does it have a vanilla fragrance, Richard? It doesn't. No, it's actual vanilla orchid. It produces vanilla pods. When it comes available, hopefully anyway. Digwet says, been using Envy on my tomatoes. Great yields this year. They are sending me another bottle. Fantastic, fantastic. I've not used it. I've had it set up there. I might fill it up with something else so I can use it. But I've got so many different plant feeds. More than what I could ever use. More than what I could ever use. And they take up more and more space. Again, this is the joys of being a content creator and having people reach out and send you stuff. It's lovely, don't get me wrong. It's a lovely thing to have, but it does take up room. It does take up room. Right, it seems like a good opportunity now. Where have I put it? Where is it? Oh, there. I've just got to go get it. Hold on. Bear with. Oh, I've dropped it. There we go. Right, back. So for this week's mission was to make an irrigation system. Now, as you know, I like to do this in a keep it simple way. So what I did, I've got a bottle. In fact, I'll show you. This is a 5 litre bottle was used for water. We bought this when we had no water, and all I've done, hopefully you'll see this on camera, is in the lid I have drilled, you can just about see it, drilled a hole into it. So what I'll do, I'll fill this up with water, put the lid on, and then I'll take this out to one of my plants, probably one of my pumpkin plants, and just submerge it into the soil and let it slowly trickle out. Now, I haven't put a hole in the top because I'm hoping that's just going to slow it down. It may need a hole in the top, thinking about it, to allow air in, otherwise it might not soak it through. But we can see what happens when it goes in. So that is our irrigation system, our homemade irrigation system. Pass mission accomplished or mission failed, let me know, and don't forget to come up with your own mission. And we need a cook along for next week as well. Nicholas says, is it a natural feed, Digwell? Talking about the envy stuff. I can't quite get to it to find out. Looks like the pubs will be open to 6 a.m. There was talk, what was it, last year when the girls won it, there was talk of having an extra bank holiday. I think Keir Starmer was very much saying, or telling the government at the time, that we should have a bank holiday, and it didn't happen. Does that mean if they win this year, we're going to have another bank holiday? Because he's in charge now, he can make it happen. Slightly off topic. I don't normally do politics, so I'm just getting that out there. Digwet says, why not do a side-by-side comparison of all the feeds you have used on the same variety of veg? See which is best. Yeah, that has always been my intention of doing it. In all honesty, I haven't had the headspace to think about how to do it. Organization. That is what I mean by end up with all these feeds and fertilizers that I don't use because I want to do exactly what you're talking about there, Digwell. I want to do exactly what you're talking about. And then it just can't get to that. I will do. Just everything seems to get in the way. Does that make sense? Does that make sense that everything gets in the way? And that's exactly what I want to do. Let's have a quick check on Instagram. Skinny Jean Gardner has joined. Welcome along, buddy. Hope you are well. I can see we have got 2 hashtag missions, but no hashtag cook along for what we could do as a cook along. Right. Coffee. Yeah, it's all about organization. That's why I end up with so many feeds and fertilizers. I've done it with composts in the past, where I've done different composts and seen how they worked, and that was easy because it was just the same thing. But yeah. Digwell says, I did the same with the bottle. Talking about this, but I put a cane through the cap and the base of the bottle to hold it into place. I was hoping if I'd sunk it in the ground, it would stay in place. But again, it's the whole point of experimenting is to find out how it works. Uh, hashtag cook along. You need hashtag cook along in one word for that to work. Hashtag cook along one entire word. Do a vegetable curry from veg grown. Vegetable curry. I've done that before, but it's certainly an option. Certainly an option. I've got cauliflower, I've got cabbage, I've got tomatoes, I've got aubergines, I've got chilies. I've got so many vegetables, and I still haven't, or I don't feel I've got as productive as I could. Jenny says, I've sent you a DM. Let's have a look at it. Let's have a look of her shed. Oh, wow. Hopefully you're going to see this okay. It's a bit difficult to share. But that is her shed. As you can see, it's very, very small. It does remind me of my old wardrobe. But organised because everything is on the shelves and organised. I like that. I like that a lot. Now, personally, when it comes to being organised in the shed, I prefer things to be on drawers as well. I mean, everything behind me is drawers for that reason, because I hate having to go down low and get something right at the back. So I like to get everything in drawers. There we go. Nicola's done the hashtag cook along correctly. So that will have appeared. Let's have a quick look. Yep, we've got it there. We've got it there. Anybody else got any ideas for the cook along? Now it's time to enter Richard's rent. I haven't done this so much lately because I've been not having in the headspace to think of a rent. The rent was designed as a bit of a vent and moan, but it's hard when I'm a positive person to find something to rant and moan about. But I got one this week. So our fence, lovely fence, borders with our neighbours. What happens? Our neighbours have grown stuff on their side, which they're perfectly entitled to do. Got no problem with it. And I've also got another side to this as well. But what seems to happen? They've got this particular bush, I don't know what to call it, down the end of a garden that has grown over our summer house, over the fence. And when I say over, I mean it's grown over the fence down to the floor. It's a thick old thing. I try cutting it back quite regularly to reduce it down. Towards the front, they've also got jasmine that does exactly the same. It's this load of foliage coming over. It's compost material is the only good way I can sort of like it, but it's very invasive at the same time. So my complaint about this is more that this foliage coming over from my neighbours is invading into my garden, taking over my garden, making it very difficult to maintain. And I'm not happy with it. I don't want to go and fall out with my neighbours about it, of course, because it's not right to do that. And they've also mentioned about my raspberries that are also spreading into their garden as well. So it's a two-way street. But how do you deal with it? How do you try and get rid of stuff that is growing into your garden from your neighbours when it becomes incredibly invasive? How do you deal with that when it becomes incredibly invasive into your garden? And it's like, you may not remember, I used to have ivy in my garden that was like 6 foot wide at the top. It's like that sort of thickness, 6 foot into our garden. We cut it back and it just seems to cut back incredibly quick at the same time. I don't like to use weed killer. It's not my plant to weed kill off either. So how do you deal with it when it just is so invasive into your garden? Jasmine and something else, I can't remember what it is. Cook along, we've done that. Cook along, a Chinese dish using your own veg, beef and broccoli, or chicken and sweet corn soup. A Chinese dish, I like that as well. Beddoes, cook along, beer battered fish, triple cooked chips and mushy peas. Like that as well. Nicholas says mile a minute is the same, Richard. Mile a minute is the same as what? Sorry, you've lost me there a bit, Nicola. Turbo Stream says hashtag rent. My neighbours seed brambles and bird bindweed all over and under my fence. The one behind have 60-foot conifers that block everything out, including the sky. Yep, this is exactly my point, is that there's TurboStream's having the same problem. We want to get on with our neighbours. We want to work with our neighbours, but brambles, bindweed, conifers blocking out the light. It's hard to be kind about it, isn't it? Well, you still want to be kind, always be kind, but it's hard to not get upset by it and not want to have a go or shout about it and get it sorted. How do you deal with it? How do you deal with it when your neighbour's plants are affecting your garden, and vice versa? Vice versa. My old neighbour had a conifer growing over tall, taking all my light, plus roots coming under the fence up into my veg beds. I built a wall between the concrete post and cut the branches down. Mile a minute is very invasive. Oh, okay, there we go. Yeah, how do you deal with it? How do you deal with it when your neighbour's plants are invading your garden, when they're getting too big, that they block out light, or they're taking up room in your garden that you want to use for yourself? As I said, this thing down the back of my garden, it comes over from my neighbours. My fence is about 8 foot tall. It drops down that fence onto the floor, taking up our patio area. I cut it back quite regularly. That's the only way I seem to be able to keep on top of it. But it grows so fast, it feels like I need to do it on a daily basis. And then my summer house down the end of my garden, which is just covered in it. It looks quite nice, actually. It looks like it's a hidden room in what's it called? I can't think. It just looks like there's a building covered in wisteria or something to deal with. Jenny says, invite them around to see. Maybe they don't realise. But it's possible. It's possible. It's a two-way street, as I said. I know they've mentioned my raspberries that seem to be coming up in their lawn as well. So it's a two-way street. I can do something about the raspberries, but what can we do about this? Nicholas says, nature keeps covering my growing space. Exactly. Nature does cover all our growing spaces. That's nature, though. That means if nature is taking up your growing space, that's a sign you have a good soil. If nothing grew, I would be more worried. If nothing grew in the space that you have, I would be more worried. But nature coming in is doing exactly what nature does. I had my hedge reduced as my neighbour came round to discuss it. Cost me 150, but worth every penny as it was a nightmare to cut. Absolutely. Yeah, it may cost money. I've got to get rid of a tree. I've mentioned this many times before. Got to get rid of a tree. It's going to be expensive, but it's going to be worth it to get it done at the same time. In fact, it was my neighbours who mentioned about this tree as well, although they did apologise. They didn't want to moan about it. They just said it's blocking out light, and it's not a tree I want. So I totally understand it. As I said, I'm having a rant, but it's a two-way street. We're all guilty. We're all innocent. How would you go about doing it? Digrat says, I just keep trimming them. Do not throw the clippings over the fence, as that is now illegal. Totally agree with that. Plus, it's compost material. That's the way I've sort of summarised it in my head. It's compost material. But you are supposed to ask if they want the trimmings before you dispose of them. Yeah, like that happens. Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is that it's compost material. This is me putting a positive spin on it, as I try and do all the time. I cut it back and I get all this lovely compost material, which is something we need to produce a lot of. We need a lot of compost material in this place, because we are no dig gardeners. We need to produce a lot of compost. Nicholas says, trees are expensive. I've spent thousands, large sycamores and 60-inch conifers. Yeah, this is ash. This is an ash tree that I just got to cut down. Turbo Stream, the other neighbour had a big tree removed, so I can't in honesty complain about a bit of bindweed. My garden is so much better with it removed. Yeah, I mean, the thing I say when it comes to weeds, bindweeds, that's nature moving in where a vacuum is. Nature hates a vacuum, so it always tries to move in where there is space. And this is why we get so many weeds in the vegetable garden, because we're trying to grow our vegetables, but we need to give them space in between to let them grow. but nature takes over that space. Nature hates a vacuum, and it will try to fill it. And it could be grass, it could be bindweed, it could be anything like that. Nature hates a vacuum. Where are my notes? Just have a quick check, make sure I've covered everything. Power tools. That's something, yeah, we've touched upon that as well in the chat. But yeah, nature hates a vacuum, so we always got to try and. This is why I try not to ever have any bare soil, because nature hates a vacuum. If there's a bare soil, nature will try and fill it. So it's hard. That's why I tend to use, if a bed's empty, green manures to stop nature having filling up that space. What I'm trying to do, especially as we go into winters, is to try and grow green manures alongside some of our veg plants. So, for example, my winter brassicas, my winter cabbages are going into my early potato bed, and I'm going to sow some green manures alongside the winter cabbages, just probably some clover or something, white clover, so that the cabbages will grow above the white clover, but the white clover will help reduce the weeding, because it's going to smother everything else out. That's why I say nature hates a vacuum. That's what I try and do. Turbo Stream says, you have decluttered your list now. Do you feel relieved? Yes, I do. I've gone through everything on my list, so that feels better. I hate vacuuming too. Digwell says, nature hates a vacuum. Vacuums suck. Indeed they do. Indeed they do. This is why, this is completely off topic, but this is why I believe there is life on other planets. Because if nature hates a vacuum and tries to fill a void, what makes Earth so special, given that the universe is supposed to be so large? I cannot for 1 second believe that the only planet in the universe is Earth that has life. Digwell, do you know why elephants do not like penguins? Because they can't get the wrappers off. Boom, boom, boom. Good one, good one, good one. Andy Jones, yes, trees very expensive. Dead ash trees with ash dieback all over the country. People aren't having them cut down. Yeah, well, they're expensive to get them cut down is one thing, but also, it says as he made his hair a mess, trying to get somebody out to cut this tree down has been really, really difficult. I only want somebody to come along and cut it down for me. And I've asked several arborists, and nobody seems interested. So I'm going to have to do it myself. Probably a good thing because of how much money we've spent lately. So we're going to have to cut it down ourselves, and hopefully that'll be our winter fuel. Or, well, it won't be this winter, it'll be next winter's fuel, next winter's heating. But yeah, ash dieback is a big, big, big problem. A big problem in the world, in the country. I don't. Well, assume. Oh, sorry, I jiggled the camera there. Must be going on in other countries as well. Nicholas says, I had ash dieback, cut right back, doing so much better, but still will die in time. Indeed, indeed, indeed. Ash trees are pretty renowned for that dieback at the moment. What was the other one? Dutch elm disease, which I think came from Canada, if I'm not mistaken. Why it was called Dutch elm disease, yeah, it came from Canada, I never know. But that's a prolific problem as well. Digger says, I have two in my neighbour's garden behind me. Reported them as they have ash dieback. They want an update in a year. There we go. There we go. Time Extreme says, someone was burning their trees after they couldn't get anyone in to remove them. Smoked the street out for weeks in that hot weather. I don't know why people would do that. Why would people burn a tree that is green? It's going to smoke. It's going to smell. You have to let it season for at least a year. Nicola, who do you report it to, Digwell? And Bedos, who goes up the ladder with a chainsaw? You or Amanda? It would be Amanda going up the ladder with a chainsaw. I don't do heights. I don't do heights, hence why we're trying to get somebody in. So it will be Amanda. Digwell says, one report says that ash dieback is receding as the trees are fighting back even when infected. That's good news. That's good news. That kind of makes sense as well, because nature is a strong weapon. It will fight back. And they develop immunity, etc., etc. Jenny says, I think it was Q who realised an article on ash dieback. Young trees are starting to show signs of resilience, so keep your fingers crossed. There we go. Exactly what Digwell said as well. So there is hope. There is hope. And hopefully these genetics are going to pass on. So ash dieback will become less of a problem. Tavistock had to close the windows in 30 degrees C temps. The fire brigade turned up, but not sure if it was their garden. I'm sure it wasn't a fire brigade garden. I'm sure they wouldn't set fire to a tree without them knowing it, without them doing it. So who knows? Oh, any photos this week? Yes, there are photos. I've also realised I've got to do the thing. So your photos, let's have a quick look at your photos. So some of Beddo's humour, we're kicking these photos off today, and the picture says, buy myself a plant today because today would be my birthday if I was born today. So everybody can go and buy a plant every single day of the year because it could be your birthday. Daniel has shared a photo of this conjoined cucumber, 2 cucumbers that have melded together. Interested. Nathan's tomatoes are looking great. These black tomatoes look stunning again, as always. I do like some interesting tomatoes as well. And Stuart didn't notice this courgette until it was too late. Still bet it will taste good. Please do keep sharing your photos. Post them in our Facebook group, or you can send to me via social media, or email me, richard@adventuregroundpodcast.co.uk. Nearly forgot about the photos. We'll do the draw in just a moment. Next week, I want to talk about how do you keep records of what's going on in your garden? How do you keep records of your gardening? Digwell says, have a guess what they call Dutch elm disease in the Netherlands. Yep, English elm disease. Interesting. Beddoes, can you play in a video where you do it? Could do with some expert advice before I do anything. But cutting down the tree, it's not going to be expert advice from me, but I'll see what I could do. Right, let's do the draw for the cook along. So wrong one. Let's find it. It's this one. So we got 3 entries for the cook along. Let's hit it. We got Beddoes, Digwell, and Nicola. So who is it gonna be? It is Digwell's idea, which I think, if I remember correctly, was a Chinese recipe using the veg that we grow. But you could, of course, just tell me if I've got that right, please. And then we got one more to do. We got the mission for next week. Let's see if that's came up. It has. So what we're going to do for the mission next week? 2 people, Jenny and Scott. I cannot remember what either of these were. Winner is Jenny. If you can let me know what that was, that would be great as well. Right. It's very nearly 7:30, so it's very nearly time to go. If anybody could let me know the football results so far, whether we're in extra time, etc. But I'm going to start wrapping up. So next week, I want to talk about how do you keep records of your gardening. Jenny, the mission was do an inventory of my equipment. Was that what you said? Was it the seeds? I remember the inventory, yeah. And she'll send the notes over. I can't remember. I think the cook along was the Chinese, Digwell's Chinese dish out of the veg that we've grown, if I remember correctly. Anyway, yeah, it is 7:30, so it's time now to get out of here, pack up, and we'll come back again next Sunday at 6, where we're going to talk about how do you keep notes of your gardening. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, it's been a pleasure. Yep, Digwell says it was a Chinese recipe. I thought so, so confirmed. But yeah, thank you so much as always. Better check Instagram because I haven't checked in on that for a while. Yeah, a couple of people have joined over on there. Right, guys. You take care. I'll speak to you again next Sunday at 6.